Imagine waking up one morning and discovering that your entire village has disappeared, swallowed whole by the earth itself. That nightmare became reality in Sudan's Darfur region, where a catastrophic landslide buried an entire community under mountains of rock and mud. More than 1,000 lives were lost in just minutes. Families vanished, children were buried alive, and homes that had stood for generations were reduced to nothing but silence. The tragedy struck so suddenly, so violently, that even those who tried to escape were swept away by the unstoppable tide of earth. But this is not just another natural disaster. It is a story of unimaginable loss, of human suffering, and of a community fighting desperately for survival. How could an entire village vanish overnight? Why was there only one survivor out of more than 1,000 people? These haunting questions have shocked the world and left investigators scrambling for answers. Was it simply nature's fury, or did years of war, neglect, and climate extremes make this tragedy inevitable? Stay with us as we uncover the devastating story of Sudan's deadliest landslide, a disaster that has left scars not only on the land, but on the hearts of those who remain. The tragedy in Tarasin is more than a local disaster. It is a humanitarian catastrophe with consequences that reach far beyond Sudan's borders. In just a few moments, over 1,000 lives were wiped out. Among them were nearly 200 children who had gathered in schools and homes, never imagining that their final day had arrived. Families were separated forever, and survivors now faced the unbearable pain of searching for loved ones buried beneath the rubble. The destruction did not stop at human lives. More than 1,500 houses were completely destroyed, livestock was buried alive, and farmland that once sustained the village is now nothing but mud and stone. What was once a fragile community of farmers and herders has been erased in a single strike of nature's fury. But the stakes go even deeper. This tragedy happened in Darfur, a region already torn apart by years of civil war and displacement. Many of the people who perished were not even native villagers, but refugees who had fled violence, seeking safety in the mountains. For them, the landslide was a cruel second blow. They escaped war, only to be buried by the earth itself. Now, with roads destroyed and access nearly impossible, aid cannot reach those in desperate need. Survivors are left with nothing: no food, no clean water, no shelter. Diseases threaten to spread quickly in the aftermath, while fear and despair grip those who remain alive. The world is beginning to ask, how could this happen in a place already broken by conflict? And more importantly, what will happen to the survivors if help does not arrive soon? Just when the world thought the tragedy could not get any worse, the story of Tarasin revealed even darker twists. Rescue teams were expected to rush in quickly, but days passed, and help never came. The reason? Tarasin is trapped deep in the Marrah mountains, a region cut off by destroyed roads and heavy rains. To reach the village, aid workers would have to walk for hours or ride camels through dangerous terrain. By the time the first responders arrived, hundreds of lives had already been lost. And then came the most shocking detail: of the entire population, only one person survived. Imagine the weight of being the sole survivor, carrying the memories of friends, neighbors, and family who will never return. This single survivor is now both a symbol of hope and a reminder of the unbearable loss suffered by an entire community. But the obstacles did not end there. Ongoing conflict in Sudan has made the tragedy even more complicated. The region is under the control of armed rebel groups, and communication with the outside world is almost impossible. International organizations are calling for urgent assistance, yet their convoys are blocked, their workers threatened, and supplies delayed. Meanwhile, villagers left behind have no choice but to dig with their bare hands. Without proper equipment, Every rescue attempt is a desperate gamble against time. For many, the search is not for survivors anymore, but for bodies to bury with dignity. This unexpected turn, nature's fury combined with man-made war, has left the world stunned. How much more suffering can one community endure before the world finally listens? The scenes in Tarasin are almost too painful to describe. Entire families buried together, their homes crushed under waves of earth, mothers clutching children, frozen in their final moments. A school building, once filled with laughter, now nothing more than shattered walls and silence. Survivors tell of the terrifying roar that echoed through the valley just before the hillside gave way. Within minutes, the entire village was swallowed. People screamed, ran, prayed, but the mountain moved faster than human legs could carry them. It was not a flood, not a fire, but an unstoppable wall of earth that left no chance of escape. For those who rushed back to help, the nightmare only grew. Secondary landslides buried rescuers alongside the very people they tried to save. Hope was crushed again and again, until villagers could no longer tell how many lives had been lost. The lone survivor, a man whose story has captured global attention, recalls the silence after the chaos. He was pulled from beneath the rubble with injuries, disoriented and in shock. When he opened his eyes, the village he knew no longer existed. Everyone he had ever spoken to, eaten with, or shared life with was gone. His survival is a miracle, but one wrapped in unbearable grief. Around him, villagers dig not for life, but for closure. Each recovered body is greeted with wails of sorrow, and yet also a small measure of relief. At least the dead can be laid to rest with dignity. But thousands remain buried, and the stench of death lingers in the air, a reminder of just how fragile human existence is in the face of nature's power. This is the climax of Sudan's tragedy, not just the destruction of buildings, but the erasure of a community's very soul. In Tarasin, the mountain did not simply collapse, it erased history, memories, and the heartbeat of an entire people. The tragedy of Tarasin is not just a story of loss, it is a warning. It reminds us that when nature strikes, it is the most vulnerable who suffer the most. As the dust settles, aid groups around the world are calling for urgent support. Organizations like Save the Children have managed to reach the site with food, water, and medical supplies, but their efforts are far from enough. Roads remain impassable, communication is scarce, and the needs of survivors grow by the hour. Without immediate help, hunger, disease, and despair could claim even more lives. Yet, amid the sorrow, there is also resilience. Villagers, though broken and grieving, are refusing to give up. They are digging with their hands, carrying bodies with dignity, and comforting each other in the darkest of times. The lone survivor's story has become a symbol. Even in the face of overwhelming devastation, the human spirit can endure. The world now faces a choice, to turn away or to listen and act. This disaster is not only about Sudan, it is about the fragility of human life everywhere. War, climate change, and neglect amplify nature's wrath, and unless we respond, tragedies like Tarasin will repeat again and again. For those who lost everything in Sudan's deadliest landslide, our voices matter. By remembering, by sharing, and by helping, we honor the lives buried beneath the mountain and ensure their story will not be forgotten.